This is For Home in Heaven, a podcast about living faithfully in the everyday with eternity in mind.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to For Home in Heaven podcast, where we talk about living a faithful, grounded life rooted in the everyday work of home, farm, and family with eternity in mind. I'm Mary.
And I'm Noah.
And we are your hosts of the show.
All right. So first and foremost, I think one thing is we are not professional podcasters, as you will notice. So a little bit of flubbing, especially in the beginning. But I think that as time goes on, definitely excited to see how this goes. I feel like we'll get a little bit better at it, but kind of start and see where it goes.
Yeah. And it's always funny doing things like this. It's so unnatural for us. However, we've prayed about this and thought about this for years, probably 3 or 4 years before Fidelis, Terra even came into fruition. So the fact that we're finally doing it, we're really excited. We have a lot to share with you guys. However, give us some grace as we get more comfortable doing something like this.
All right. So without further ado, I think before we talk about Fidelis Terra and kind of the whole idea of the farm and all of that, I think a good thing that we want to start with is kind of what is Fidelis Terra. So I think we can each share a little bit about kind of who we are, where we came from, and then give us a little bit of backstory about where it's all been, and then kind of how it led to where we are now.
All right. So a little bit of my background. So I grew up in Minnesota in your classic, typical neighborhood. Definitely not an HOA type situation, but very homey environment. I grew up one of 4 siblings. My mom and dad raised me a devout Catholic, and me and my siblings, I guess all of us as devout Catholics. And although we gardened, we had a small garden in the back. My mom was always cooking from scratch. I mean, we had dogs, but nothing about my life screamed homestead or farm at all. Not the slightest. Actually, I'm not really an animal person, which is so funny how I even came around to this side of things and to the idea of farming. But yeah, so my background was like your classic growing up in the early 2000s in a little neighborhood in Minnesota, just, couple parents, couple siblings, nothing crazy, nothing to do with farming whatsoever.
And then you look 180 degrees different from that, and then you would have my background. So I grew up oldest of 9 kids in Connecticut. We were homeschooled, so 9 kids already weird, then homeschooled, and then we grew up on a hobby farm. So where my parents are now, and then also just in general where we grew up, was always out in the woods. So we were surrounded by 30,000 acres of state forest, and we had kind of a small hobby farm. So we did huge veggie gardens. We did goats and chickens and pigs, and the pigs were a little bit later, miniature horses. We did a little bit of everything. We were hunting, trapping, fishing, working on local farms, doing haying. So again, complete opposite, where again, big family, very rooted in our Catholic faith, but again, kind of different from how Mary grew up, where there was the homeschool, there was the farm. And that's something I've always been kind of a part of and always really longed to continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny too, because when we met, Noah and I actually met online. I was a senior in college. He had been in the work. He had graduated years prior and was already working. And when I met him, at first I was like, "There's no way. It's Connecticut. It's not happening. I'm in Wisconsin for school. Not going to happen." But within, I would say, a few days, we kind of hit it off, and soon started to realize individually, like, this might be the person that the Lord wants me to spend the rest of my life with. So right off the bat, because Noah and I, as you will learn as we do the podcast, we are 0 to 100 people. There's nothing slow about our life or our relationship. And so we started talking about marriage and family values and children and all of those things early on. Before we had even met each other in person, we were still about 1,000 miles apart from each other. And one of the biggest things that we talked about early on was children, with the idea of homeschooling, as well as living on property someday, and wanting, what our values were when it came to, I guess, homesteading or living on property or things like that. I think I was just on cloud 9 that I was willing to just say yes to anything, because I just wanted to marry the man that moment. However, it did open up that conversation early on. So we were kind of on a similar-ish page from the start.
Yeah, and I think too, with all that, the cool thing about it is, again, not only does it change over time, and it kind of shows as you grow as a couple, how your views and your values can kind of shift, and your as your perspective changes. But I think too, at that point, it was all again there's the overarching idea, and I guess that's kind of the reason why we wanted to name the podcast this is it's all about for home and kind of creating that home and creating that like taking a house, turning it into a home, the cliche there. But then how do you take each other first and foremost? But then as your family comes into the world and grows, how do you take that to heaven? And what are the things that you need to do in order for that to happen? So
Mm.
I think that was something that again was the values were there. I think is the most important part because over time again that changed and drifted like obviously very different backgrounds coming from for both sides me living on more of a hobby farm than anything else and then with big family homeschooling and then Mary again living more not 100% traditional but a pretty standard kind of middle of the road type of life just not nothing too crazy one way or another so
Mhm.
I think the big idea is again we wanted to have a really solid Catholic home and we really wanted to get each other and then our future family to heaven. I think that's kind of the most important part that led into everything else.
Hmm. So I think moving on to kind of a little bit of how did our farm begin, right? Or our homesteading adventures. So we're not going to get into super grave detail, but I would say that my eyes started to open and become more, I guess my heart was opening a lot more to the idea of becoming more self-sufficient. When 2020 hit, we all kind of know what that was. And especially after the birth of our second daughter, it was a very traumatic birth for me and opened up my eyes a lot of not only the Western medicine world, but more so learning that hey, there's a systems that we don't necessarily want to. We want to make sure that that we're making the right choice for our family, and we had the say in what we want to do, whether it was medicine or the food that we ate or the way that we chose to live or where we lived, things like that. And so when we ended up moving to North Carolina, it would have been 2021. We kind of had that idea, although we were renting in a small neighborhood, we kind of had that idea that someday when we get settled, we really get established in our area, we want to find property. Didn't know what that looked like, didn't know if property meant an acre or 50 acres, had no idea. But we knew we wanted to find property so we could really dive in head first to creating that self sufficient lifestyle that we really aim to have, I suppose.
Yeah, I think too, along with that is also kind of refining the idea of like what does a farm mean. So, like I mentioned, growing up, we had like a farm, but again, I had a conversation with my brother the other day, and he's like, as soon as you were kind of required to make money on the farm, what we were doing was more for fun. We obviously had the chickens and the goats and all that kind of stuff, and we did milking, and I had honeybees at one point, and did a lot of stuff for fun. But as soon as you kind of transition it from being kind of a for fun project to a this needs to like feed the family, sustain the family,
Mhm.
changes everything. And so, kind of along the way too, we had kind of little tiny bouts of, I guess, micro farming, but the idea was more so taking that like for fun aspect. And so it didn't really kind of do anything, and it actually just ended up exhausting us a little bit. And so I think along the way too is kind of refining how we looked at what a farm could be and what the use and value of it was going to be. So I think is another thing that, like, especially from my perspective, was like extremely important, kind of throughout the whole process.
Mhm. And I think too, something to go along with that as well is when Noah and I were in the process of when we were renting in our little tiny suburban town in North Carolina outside of Charlotte, we were really praying about okay, where does the Lord want us to settle in this area? Is it even in this area? Is it long term in this area? What does that look like in what capacity? And I think where we finally settled on our current property with our current house and our current living situation, it totally was a God thing. I mean, you always talk about like, oh, like the Lord totally opened up this door. And that's 100% what it was. We were coming into this thing with an incredibly small budget, very small budget. We had a laundry list of things. We had a lot of babies. We knew that we were going to need a house that was going to be able to fit our growing family. We had two with one on the way at the time. Now we have four. And we wanted to be able to have property that we could do all sorts of things on, again, to achieve that self sufficient lifestyle. But on, like I said, a very small budget. So when we ended up finding this property, I mean, land prices all across the United States are astronomical. We all can agree on that. But especially in an area down here, we're about an hour and a half outside of Charlotte. Tons of people are flocking into North, South Carolina. And so pricing of everything is going up. So the fact that we were able to find our land, it was raw, there was just overgrown trees and whatever. The fact that we were able to find it with the price that it was, and we put a brand new manufactured home on it, basic. It was not a fancy one. And we squeaked in just under our budget. And we looked around, and it was by the time we were about to move in and we got our keys, it was just trees, and we hadn't not a whole ton. Really didn't have a whole ton to get us started.
Yeah, the joke I told someone recently was that every time we move, we get slightly more living space, but much less storage space. So
Mhm.
in our first house in Connecticut, we had it was a small little house, 1,000 square feet, but then there was basically double that size in the basement. So like it basically doubled the square footage without like half of it was storage, half of it was livable. We moved to the rental house in North Carolina when we first came down here. Tiny little garage, so we had even less storage space, and I guess we had an attic too. And then to here it was just living space and like the closets we had in the bedroom. So it was definitely kind of funny how it's kind of shifted a little bit. As the family grew, we got less storage space, which was
And
kind of
less stuff.
and less stuff.
We've gotten rid of a lot of stuff, which is a good thing. I don't like clutter. I don't like keeping all that stuff. And I think it's helped us stay more minimal and be really appreciative for what we do have,
Hmm.
for the little amount of things. And it's really taught us to, and Noah grew up very like you guys had a purpose for like every single egg carton that was saved and every single little to go container was saved for a certain purpose. I was not like that, but now that we, have less and less and less, we're really appreciative and really mindful in how we use our tools,
Hmm.
excuse me, in and out of the house as well.
And that's a shout out to my mom who saved Dunkin' Donuts cups for coffee to go cups. But then the question then becomes like, why do we end up naming it Fidelis Terra? So quick rewind. When we were up in Connecticut, we lived in a tiny little house. We had four acres, had some goats, chickens, and that stuff. And it was in the woods. There's a little brook, and so we're like, oh, Timberbrook, that would be a really cool little like homestead name. So we did that, but again, before anything, and it was more kind of
It was Noah's hobby back then. I was not. I was like, yeah, I'm here to support you, but
yeah.
it
So
was not my thing.
it was
Not my thing at all.
not a family thing
No, it was
whatsoever.
a Noah thing.
And so obviously we moved here and we're like, okay, Timberbrook Homestead. And then the joke was when we moved here, Timberbrook Homestead, because it was logged a couple years before we bought it. So there's actually no timber, there's no woods at all. And it's also like bone dry. So there's no brook. And so we're like, well, that doesn't work. And then to add to that, I'm a huge nerd. And so like Lord of the Rings, Roman legions, the whole 9 yards, history buff, fantasy buff, whatever. But really, really obsessed with Latin. And so I was just playing around with the Latin translate because I think both of us really knew that we were in a spot where, again, like God opened up so many doors that like the things that had to fall into place for us to get to where we're at now was incredible. And
Mm.
so really again going back to like the house in heaven and the doors opening up, I'm like, wow, we just want to take this and be good steward of the land and just be faithful and kind of
Give
uh,
it back to God,
give it back to
because we
God.
wouldn't be here without Him.
And so with that, was playing around Fidelis, which is faithful, and then kind of playing with different things of earth. And Terra is earth, can be translated as dirt or land. And so played around with a lot of different combinations and stuff, and not even thinking of it. But then I kind of settled on this Fidelis Terra, and I just thought it was kind of cool. I ended up telling Mary, and both of us had kind of like a light bulb moment, like this, that's
That's
it.
it. That's the name.
All right, so that's how I really came up with a name. But then how does that then like what were the first steps? So I think it was definitely a crazy time. So we moved in. The we worked with this little manufactured home company, and they worked with some subcontractors, cleared maybe an acre and a half.
Just let's put the septic in and get electric in, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
put that in, no dirt, or just dirt rather, no grass, no gardens, no water systems, no nothing. So I've since gone to a lot of different farms and they have all these outbuildings. Like, oh man, this outbuilding's falling apart. I'm like, well, at least you have an outbuilding because we had literally nothing. The
Mhm.
first thing that we did was buy a shed because we had no room for our like just anything that was storage related at all. We had zero room. And then the second thing I bought, which is the first thing I've ever bought brand new, and I will 100% recommend it, is a tractor.
Yes, that was our first, besides a mortgage, our two mortgages we've had now. That was our first big boy, big girl purchases. Was our brand new tractor.
Yes. So, and again, highly recommend it because part of the struggle, especially having a young family, is you're kind of working out like it's not a one man show, but Mary is basically completely tied down with everything that's going on inside. Like especially with like when we first moved here, Margot was 2.5.
She had just turned 3. We had a 3-year-old, a brand new 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old when we first moved in.
Which so again, especially with like the whole property is just dirt. Not really much going on there. There's nothing to do outside. And then we moved here in September, so it was definitely a little bit. It was kind of hot still, being in North Carolina, and so definitely a lot of challenges. So a lot of the times was Mary inside, and so that me trying to figure out how to do stuff on the outside. And so tractor was really nice there. On top of that, 8.5 acres was still covered with like 4 or 5 years of brush growth. So it was okay. How do we figure that out? Um, and so that kind of started the process about 2 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
Just going through all that, figuring out what is the priority. And so that's kind of the first struggle was like how to balance that. How do you balance having a full-time job, doing other side projects, having 3 little kids at home, and then also trying to completely like uproot the land and really kind of help to build it while also then maintaining what you currently have. So that's kind of the struggle that we started off with, just to kind of put it in perspective.
But although that with that though, moving forward, Noah and I kind of created a really solid rhythm in and out of the house. I know he mentioned it, but he's definitely the one that takes control on the outside. I help out when I can. I'm the one that takes control on the inside. He helps out when he can. And I would say it's a very traditional setup. He goes to get the meat and I cook the meat. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very classic setup. However, he and I have learned that in order to, we both had the same goals in mind. We both had the same vision. We have the same goals, the same dreams for our family, for our kids, for our property. And that dream cannot be accomplished unless we're willing to work with each other. So there might be a day where he needs to go brush hog the field so we can prepare for pasture for cows, hopefully in a few months. And that might take 3 to 4 hours in one day. Okay, well then that sounds good. That means I'm on by myself inside with the kids, making sure kids are fed, kids are changed, like the house is still operating. Additionally, I might have things I'm like, I need to get things on the inside of the house. I need you to take control, take the kids so I can get all this laundry list of canning, food preserving, making sure I'm nursing a new baby constantly, all these things. And we've just learned that we just have this rhythm. Definitely, I'd say we work really well with that. Obviously, at the very start, it takes some time to kind of get our rhythm. But now that we've had a rhythm for almost 2 years, we just have a good routine that goes along with it. So I would say when it comes to that kind of helps us just staying focused, on like what are our goals, what are our dreams, and having that in mind is just, I don't know, it helps us just kind of stay rooted in the big picture, if you will, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
And I think one thing I will tell you not to do, which is what we did, or what I did, I should say, is don't start 15 projects at once.
Yeah.
Um, so to be fair, my thought process was, okay, we'll get a couple of these projects done at a time, and we'll push through. We'll get more stuff done. Doesn't really work out that way. But I think if I were to do it again, definitely prioritizing certain things. But that said, let's fast forward to where we're at today. So I think we've made a ton of progress. So we've cleared out now the first 2.5 acres or 3 acres in the front part of our property, which has really been kind of a fun progress and to see it grow. It was 100% covered in red clay, and like problem number one was how do you get kids to be able to run around outside, which is part of the reason we wanted a property like this.
Without bringing the mess in the house.
Yeah.
And not just a little bit of sand or a little bit of grass. Like we're talking red clay, which I still have red clay in clothes and rugs and things from 2 years ago that I cannot get out. So it's not like just a little bit of dirt or grass we're talking about. It's astronomical.
Oh yeah. So that was a big thing, and then also we have this like crazy ravine. So that was one part of the reason the property was a little cheaper was we had a big ravine that basically separates the back 8 acres from the front 2 acres. It's like 25 feet deep, and it was completely overgrown. And so there was things like get a land bridge to get to the back half of the property that was big. Um, Obviously start clearing the back half of the property because it was just 100% scrub brush, and then also working on things like putting a fence around the first 2 acres so that the kids can go run outside. We don't have to worry about them running to the road or running into the ravine or
We should
whatever
do a
else.
podcast episode literally, because this literally us telling about every single project we've done could be an entire episode.
100%.
So we should do it like sincerely. Let's do an episode talking about all of the things that we've done from start to finish, and that way we can lay down like our processes and everything because it's insane.
Oh yeah.
It's
No.
insane what we've gotten done in less than 2 years.
Yeah, and part that goes back to the whole like having a million things going on at once. Is I eventually finished them all, so that was kind of cool.
Are we crazy? Are we efficient? Or are we both? I don't know yet.
Yes. So where are we at now? Okay, so we have the back 8 acres was cleared in terms of the trees and scrub brush and all that stuff, but then there's tons of stumps, there's tons of divots and all that stuff. So part of my big project for this summer is clearing the back 8 acres. I've already done probably the first 3 acres, basically digging it all up and then grading it a little bit with the tractor, brush hogging, keeping the brush down. But the goal there is to turn that back 8 acres into pasture. So where we want to get to is cows, just a few cows to start.
Just enough to feed our family. We're not, I think farming and homesteading I find very different. I always tell Noah farming and homesteading are different. Would it be? It's great when we can share our, I guess, products with other families and like local families, and we love that. But at the end of the day, what's the number one goal? It's feeding our family. So we're not out there to do 50 cows. We're out there to do 2 or 3 cows, maybe.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy.
But so the cows is a big thing. We've had pigs now for the last two, like basically since we first moved onto the property, and that's a whole nother story.
We'll talk about that again. And we love our pigs. We're all about, we sell pork. We love the pigs.
Yeah, Sherman and Dorothy are the breeder pair, and then we raise probably 2 litters a year, grow them up, and sell them for meat. But so they're in the back, and it's constantly building new pastures for them or paddocks for them, and then also utilizing them to help to actually grade, or not even grade, but help to dig up some of the stumps and stuff. So we have those. We started off with 25 chickens.
25 chickens, and chicken math. You lose some, you add some, you gain some, whatever. So we had 25, and now we're somehow up to 48 hens. They're not all laying yet, but we have 48 hens. We just got rid of 40 meat birds.
50
meat birds. We got them all butchered and processed when I was about 37, 38 weeks pregnant with this one. So at one point on our property, we had a close to probably close to 75 birds at a time because we lost some and then gained more. So
yeah, so we had that. So we're raising meat birds, we're raising egg layers, we're raising pigs,
babies.
We're raising babies, obviously, as you will see. What else? So we're trying to grow that. I think a big thing is the infrastructure. So I set up a solar. So we're actually in a shed right now. Because again, no space. So when we found out we were pregnant with Claire, I'm like, well, we're not gonna have an office and or any storage space for all this prepping. So we found a repossessed shed, like a 12 by 32 shed, and actually ended up completely refinishing the inside.
It's like a mini house. Someone could live in here. I mean, there's no kitchen or bathroom, but it's insulated, it's temperature controlled. Someone could live in here.
And then like that tied with when we had Hurricane Helene last year, I'm like, okay, power is extremely important, and I wanted to play around with solar. So I started and built up a 10 kilowatt solar system, and put it all together, kind of DIY. Only electrocuted myself twice, which is cool. But did that. So expanding that is something big, and also other infrastructure like a small barn, chicken coops, a more substantial hog house. A lot of stuff we've done is kind of in phases, where there's the temporary phase, then the semi-temporary phase, and then kind of moving into the permanent phase. And so a lot of stuff we're in now is the semi-permanent phase, and we're really trying to move into the permanent phase over the next year or so, with some of these buildings and other infrastructure around the homestead.
And I think something too, like we are definitely not people that are rolling in money. That's for dang sure. We do everything. Obviously you have to have a good budget. We try to budget as much as we can. Are we perfect? No, but we're working towards it. We're working towards the lifestyle. We budget as much as we possibly can. We've also been really blessed to do a couple of exchange of services with other people in the area, whether it might be grading our yard or doing things with the shed, or there's been certain things we've been able to do that and save some costs there. And we've also just been really diligent. I think, again, going back to how we absolutely could not do any of this without the Lord. There's just no way. And I think when the God knows our hearts, and he knows our desires, and he knows that we are trying to be not only stewards of the land, but stewards of our finances as well. I think just putting that ultimate trust in him, like, hey, we are really, like, again, like Noah gave the example. When we found out I was pregnant with our fourth Claire, it was, okay, well, we need an office for Noah to work. Where the heck are we going to do that? How are we going to come up with the money to do that? And somehow, by the grace of God, things popped up, we made it work, and things happened, and we'd get deals on this, or Noah would get a job doing X, Y, and Z, and whatever. And that's kind of how it's been for pretty much everything on the property, whether it's fencing, whether it's selling animals, whether it's selling eggs, or buying literally anything. It's all been because of the Lord. And so yeah, I'd say again, going back to that, we literally could not do this without Him.
Yeah.
And growing our infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea too, is how do we continue to put our faith in Jesus, but also share that with others. And so I think that's kind of the idea with, not only do we want to have this farm here, because obviously I think that's really important for us and our family, but also we're able to share the community both on a kind of with products, but also I think with the name like Fidelis Terra, and also kind of the way that we want to try to live, how do we kind of act as examples, and then also act as, well, for what to do, but also what not to do in some cases. But how do we continue to be kind of lights in the community in order to continue to grow? And I think that's part of why we started, or wanted to start this podcast, was exactly that. Because again, we could have just had a homestead and called it a day, which would be great. It would be fine. But I think we wanted to kind of take some of our talents. We have just very unique story. Like obviously, like what we're doing now, you've heard a ton of different people who are homesteading, but I think the way that we got here is really, really important, and really just kind of a testament to the goodness of God.
God really wanted us here. We could have lost it all. We could have, there's been so many opportunities where it's been really high and really low, and yet here we are still. So clearly the Lord had such a hand in our life story and our family's story on the farm.
And so that's kind of why, and again, like I think it all comes back to, like, Mary and I have been talking about this now for probably well over a year, and kind of the idea is like, what is the purpose of like our life's purpose, but also like how do we kind of take this and share it to others? And it's again, it's for home and heaven. How do you kind of center people's lives in the home, and kind of point their gaze towards heaven, and how do we kind of act as a little bit of that, and help to kind of, again, act as an example, but also just act as a partner with other people, and kind of work and live with others to kind of show them how we can be just, again, better stewards of the land, better Christians, better fill in the blank, better families, etc.
Yeah, and I think too, just to like encourage people that like you don't need to have a beautiful, like pristine, gorgeous property to do this. You can do it in an HOA with a fenced in backyard, which we've done that before too. We can talk about that. You can do this if you have no experience. You can do this if you were not raised this way, in my case. You can do this if you were raised this way, but you wanted things differently, on a high budget, on a low budget. You can literally, anybody can homestead. Anybody can become self-sufficient for their family. You just have to be willing to not only put in the work, but also know that like it's not easy. And if you just persist and you just keep pushing through, the benefits outweigh the negatives all of the time. We have zero regrets from doing this. And I always tell people, if Mary Allberg, my maiden name, if Mary Allberg can do this, anybody can do this, because I am not your typical outdoorsy farming girl. And if I can develop the love and the joy for this life, literally anybody can do this. All right, guys, that said, we are going to go for now. So make sure, if you like today's episode, make sure you follow us, you subscribe, you share with your friends and family, you leave a comment down below, you write a review. Any of that stuff helps get the word of Fidelis Terra Farm out there, and Home and Heaven out there. And we are so excited to share more with you guys. And we're so grateful for all of you for sticking with us and for staying tuned and listening to the first of our story of our family and our farm.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today. You can follow along or subscribe at fidelisterrafarm.com.